Okay, hello everybody. For our final exam, I am discussing my focus statement and some of the different things as a classroom teacher that I read about, that I use, and also some new things that I read and found very helpful or will be very helpful in developing future lessons. My focus statement is, as an 8th grade ELA teacher, I believe teachers need to have training, professional development, and time in order to create lessons that provide learning strategies for ELL students in the classroom. And that was listed as three when I said training, professional development, and time. And I think those kind of working together are extremely important. When I first started out teaching, with student teaching and practicum teaching first, which was extremely helpful. I learned a lot in those processes. Overall, did not learn a lot about ELL students and different strategies, which is understandable as a teacher. I'm currently an 8th grade English teacher, but going through the English curriculum at Potsdam, you didn't really focus on specifics for ELL strategies. The first thing when developing my focus statement or explaining my focus statement, I believe that it's important to have the training and the professional development. Like I said, some of the things that I learned in the classroom my first year, I had a student, and I discussed him in another assignment, Andy. I actually received some training that our school offered on an iPad, which also allowed the student to take pictures of the curriculum or lesson plan or copy of class notes, whatever handout assignment, but it would translate it to Spanish, which was his native speaking language. That was really simple and helped. I also found some of the strategies in our book that with making the classroom more presentable for the student with labeling different areas of the classroom. Another thing with professional development, our school does an iReady test. Once we received the training on there was a section for different languages, but it allowed the test to be taken in Spanish, and it also had some testing areas for the English to Spanish and also Spanish to English translation, which also helped. Again, technology, we did some Castle learning and things that we were able to change to Spanish, which helped the student tremendously. Some of the things in the book, which I found the Brown's Principle of Language and Teaching and Learning interesting, just English being my content area. Principle 5, about the strategic investment, says that successful learning largely depends on the learner developing a set of strategies for understanding and producing the language involved in the content learning. That's why I think that there's a multiple of things to do with all students, but especially with ELL students, with different social strategies, with working with groups and working with other students. Andy happened to be in a class with a student that was fluent in Spanish and English, so it was extremely valuable to have these two students paired. So I had recommended that the students be in the same classes together, which ended up being very helpful to Andy. But to get back to the principle, with the idea of just developing a set of strategies. I think, especially with language, when I'm learning Spanish, I try to reverse it when I learn Spanish. Learning the verbiage, I believe, is important in breaking down the language, but practicing and the conversational English is extremely important. Making the student feel comfortable in the classroom, which again, I'll get to the next principle where it says, principle ain't willingness to communicate. Teachers can build student confidence, encourage risk-taking behavior by using verbal and nonverbal approval and encouragement, by assigning tasks in sequence from easier to more difficult. And again, that's a kind of a multi-layered quote from Brown's Principles, but I think the thing was making it easier to harder is important, but also building the confidence with the student, starting very simple. with the ELL students, not frustrating the student, which I think is part of the engagement also. Not disengaging the student by throwing all the difficult grammatical features of English, for example, that can be frustrating for non-ELL students, let alone ELL students. Some of the different learning strategies that I practice in my classroom, I think with Andy, that's a good example. I just think like to talk about what I know and what I've been through. When he was communicating with students, there was so many conversations that it is kind of awesome to think about because I could see him making mistakes, but the students were very helpful. And Angel, the student that was our translator, was a translator for me at first, but also, well, throughout the year, he really did help me out quite a bit. But also in the hallways with the student. But those social situations, it's a great question I could ask Andy if I get to see him again. Is, where did he learn the most? Was it in the classroom, or was it being around different classmates and hearing? Again, you learn some bad parts of the English language, some slangs and things like that. But I also think exposure to that language is important as well. In our other book, the English Only Teachers and Mixed Language, this is where I think the professional development comes in, because taking the class is really a professional development, and things like building a welcome kit. I did some of these in the classroom, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation, about labeling things and work areas. I had the students come in from the Spanish class, and they had to get some hours, and they ended up labeling the classroom, and I kind of extended it out in the hallways and things like that, and some of the other teachers did as well. But this also helped Andy and other students kind of learn Spanish, and there was also French in the school, but at the time it was an English to Spanish student, so we used Spanish quite a bit. But I found that important, where it said the guidelines for teaching ELL mixed language classrooms, that lists off different things to do in the classroom, which I thought was extremely helpful. One last thing is the different learning strategies. With the metacognitive strategies, I currently use several strategies like homework, writing down, keeping calendar organization in the classroom. I extremely stress that in class, and how important it is for my students to be organized, especially ELL students. One thing that I had Andy do on assignments is I would have them write them in his planner in Spanish, and then try to take notes in English. The more that he was able to practice learning English, it was extremely helpful to him. It is a good example too, because by the end of the year, by speaking, by making mistakes, by feeling safe in that environment to make those mistakes, I think that truly provided Andy with the best learning environment. Also, as a teacher, is being aware of being able to learn different strategies. I really had, teaching strategies as regular students, but this really fine-tuned some things that I needed to do in the district. Communication with my district as far as offering the professional development, I think, was important. To go back to my focus statement, I said as an 8th grade ELA teacher, I believe teachers need to have training, professional development, and time in order to create lessons that provide learning strategies for ELL students in the classroom. And again, I feel that is extremely important. A lot more can be said, a lot more things, but as far as that focus statement, I think that training, that development, and again, learning from your mistakes, the student as well as the teacher, I think that's important. And the Brown's principles, as I listed before, I thought that were extremely I would say important. There was other ones that are important, but really connected to my content area, which is 8th grade ELA. And I believe that's all. Thank you very much.